Onto this now. Families of the victims of the Life Esidimeni tragedy say they feel like some officials who've been called to testify at the inquest are evading accountability. This comes after a warrant of arrest was issued for former Gauteng Health Director Makgabo Manamela, who failed to show up at the inquest to testify. The inquest itself is aiming to determine if anyone can be held criminally liable for that tragedy, which cost at least 144 mental health patients their lives back in 2016. For more on this now, let's bring in Christine Nxumalo, who's part of the Life Esidimeni Family Committee. Christine joins us via our video link this morning, and it's great to have you on the program. Thanks so much indeed for speaking to us, Christine. Let me just begin by gauging from you how happy you are about how this inquest has fared so far.
We can't really say that we are happy. Good morning, and thank you for having me. We can't really say that we are happy. We are just, I suppose, I'm not sure what the word is, but we are just happy that we are satisfied, rather, that, you know, the inquest is happening and it is moving, even though it is going at a snail's pace.
Yeah, and perhaps take us through some of the areas of concern you might have. And I appreciate you're struggling to find the word to describe, I guess, the sense of unease as this inquest continues.
Look, as families, especially for the past week's, activities, families are really angry. Families are angry that so many years later, we are still struggling to get justice, for something that was so obvious. So yeah, I suppose as families, we are satisfied that the inquest is happening, and we are happy that we are now at the last three. But we knew that the last three would actually give us a hard time. Yeah,
and I guess that's your reference, for instance, to Makgabo Manamela, who again failed to appear at the inquest. There's now a warrant issued for her arrest. What questions do you have for her as families that you reckon she needs to answer urgently?
How could she, I mean, they were told right from the beginning, they were warned right from the beginning by specialists, never mind us as families. And how do you sleep, knowing that you did this, but you don't want to take accountability? How could you? And now, years later, you're still hoping that it will go away and we will stop fighting. How do you sleep? How do they sleep? It's the question.
Yeah. With any other instance where a lot of time passes, one can't blame people for feeling that justice is slipping out of their hands, for feeling despondent that there'd ever be any form of accountability that takes place. Take us through the headspace that you might be in as families around that issue.
I mean, it's so many years later, and you would think the pain would go away. You would think the experience that that most families went through would go away, but it doesn't actually. And more so when there's no one held accountable for the deaths. It makes it even more so intense, it makes you have sleepless nights. So yes, justice is just too slow for people, for the ordinary person on the ground. And I suppose if you have money, if you can delay things and stuff like that, it works for you. But for the rest of us, it is hell on earth, really, because you don't move on.
Yeah. My understanding that compensation has been paid to all of the families, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong about that. And of course, this is not going to make people come back to life. We all know that. But I wonder whether that money, for instance, you felt went enough to at least equip you to take on what now looks like litigation that's going to take place for quite some time.
Look, it helped a lot of families to recover from, from the back and forth and traveling and just, meeting with the lawyers, etc. And I suppose just to recover for that time. But money by no means or by no stretch of the imagination even replaces even a second of the time you would have had with the loved one. So, and, the honesty is that, yes, majority of families have been paid. There are still a few who are struggling to access this process, because I'm not too sure whether it's because of time having passed, but the payment from the Premier's office and the access to the processes is not as simple as it was, I suppose, in the beginning. But majority of the families have been paid, and yes, I I think people need to get over the fact that money replaces anything. It doesn't. It really doesn't. It just makes things a little easier for a little bit, but it doesn't replace a single second of anything.
Absolutely. The loved ones would rather have their relatives than the money in some instances. We do appreciate that.
In a drop of a pin, honestly. As quick as that, they would replace the money for their loved ones.
Sure. Thank you for speaking to us. Hopefully this is something that will be sorted out rather sooner than later. I appreciate the difficulty that you might be in as you try to communicate to us how you're feeling at this time. Christine Nxumalo is part of the Life Esidimeni Family Committee. That inquest is ongoing, and hopefully there'll be justice at the end of that process.